Abolitionist for Everybody is a podcast that tackles the sometimes difficult conversations around prison abolition. I'm Crystal.
And I'm Graham. This season is all about the journey of incarceration, from arrests to sentencing, family connections, parole hearings, and reentry.
Just a reminder, friends, though the title of this episode may give you some warning, remember that harm itself tends to create situations of alternate harms.
There will likely be other painful topics brought up too. Take care of you.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Abolitionist for Everybody. On this episode, we will be discussing arrests and the 72-hour holding period. We are joined by a very special guest and former board member of Initiate Justice, Hugo Gonzalez. Hugo, welcome and thank you for joining us. Can you please introduce yourself and let us know what initially comes to mind when we talk about arrests, policing, and the first initial 72-hour hold?
Yeah, my name is Hugo Gonzalez. I was arrested at the age of 16 under Proposition 21, tried as an adult while I was a juvenile and sentenced to 3 consecutive life sentences in prison. I served almost 2 decades of that before Governor Jerry Brown commuted my sentence, and I've been out for going on 7 years now in June. When thinking of the question, like, what do I think of when I think of the 72-hour arrest? I think of just being in limbo. I think of being in a country that considers itself so fair and so progressive, but at the same time still has draconian laws that can actually hold you for 72 hours, being 3 days, and literally just not letting you know why you're arrested, just having you on hold. And especially coming from a person like me that has done so much time and has grown up in the prison system, like, the last thing I want to do is feel like I'm going to go back to the place that I fought so hard to get out of. To go back into a place that I used to fantasize about getting out of, because the thought of being free again was just that, a fantasy, a daydream, something that was far-fetched, something that I was just thinking about, but I really truly felt would never come to be. Yeah, and I just off the top of my head, one immediately thinks of just the 72-hour arrest being trauma. But April 1st, my cousin had called me very early in the morning to jokingly tell me that the cops came looking for me at his apartment. And at 3 a.m, the first thing I was thinking was like, what did I do? Versus like, it's not me. And it's not that I actually did something negative, but it's that immediately when the thought of a police officers visiting someone's home that I love, looking for me, I'm so traumatized by a system that could just lock me up before even having any evidence or even being willing to tell me what I'm being locked up for. I'm automatically assuming like, damn, it's gonna happen. I'm gonna be taken in for something that I didn't do. I'm being investigated. I don't know. And I also, they could withhold any type of information for 3 whole days while I'm just sitting in this trauma of what's going on. So when you ask that question in a nutshell, I just think of not only unfairness, I think of inequality, but I also think of like having no real opinion for 3 whole days as a human being. I feel like, what's happening? I can't even ask a question. I feel like it's just like immediately back in the era of where people just tell me to shut the hell up and wait.
I was wondering, Hugo, when you got arrested, did you go through interrogation?
Yes, I mean, it was an interrogation that like I refused to be a part of, but it doesn't change the fact that it was an interrogation nonetheless. Like, I was in a cell and I was refusing to say anything, but yet they were still there for 30 minutes just grilling and telling me what my future was going to be like. They were like, just want you to know, we're going to charge you as an adult. You're going to go to an adult prison. You're going to be raped. We're trying to help you out. We're trying to have you just tell us everything we know, because we already know everything. We just want to confirm it and be on your side. We want to be able to help you out. When in all reality, that was far from the truth. When those same officers went to court to testify, they testified that I wasn't willing to answer anything, that I was not being cooperative, and that instead I had this heavy smirk and would laugh occasionally, when in all reality that was far from the truth.
Yeah, I was tripping on that when I was thinking about this. That's why I asked you that question. I was remembering times where they've attempted to interrogate me, or I've known people who either cracked or didn't crack under interrogation. And I just think it's like, so there's these Miranda rights, these rules that dictate the entire arrest process. And there's supposed to be a wall that like insulates you and protects you, but the entire police force and all of the administrative functions of the police force are literally just trying to tear through that wall however they can weasel through. And I've sat in those rooms for 14 hours, them trying to get information out of me, leaving me sitting in uncomfortable. I've had them do good cop, bad cop, which seems like it's cliche, but they literally just try to break you down. It's just amazing that that 72 hours is like their pass to do what they want.
And it's so selective depending on what substation you're at. Like Beverly Hills, being a white rich man in Beverly Hills, like you're not going to be interrogated that way. They know that your high profile attorney is 5 minutes away from coming there and taking and going through the process of either bailing you out or hey, lock him up and take him to county so that we could go through the process of bail. Whereas with me, even though my Miranda rights were read to me, and I'm saying okay, I want to exercise the right to remain silent, it doesn't change the fact that they're still bombarding me with comments and phrases of what my future will look like. Even as I was being fingerprinted, they're like, yeah, your life's going to be through. You should just tell them what they want to hear because you're just making it worse on yourself versus just giving me the right to remain silent. They're using well, does it mean we have to be silent? It could mean we could just do whatever and anything we want until we get what we want. And if we don't, then we'll go in a court of law and talk about how you didn't cooperate versus that individual that just said, hey, I want to exercise my right to remain silent and you could exit the cell now.
Did you have a bail amount?
Yeah, my bail was 3 million.
Yeah, mine was 2 million. I think it's amazing that they put such like there who has that kind of money? Even 10% of that kind of money just sitting around.
Well, I think that's the idea of it, the haves and the have-nots, right? Because there are some people that have that money. The people that feel privileged enough to say, no, I'm going to get out within the next 5, 15, 2 hours, 3 hours, like I am, versus other individuals that are just like, fuck, like not only is this number overwhelming, but I know that I'm going to have to deal with, like, I'm going to have to deal with everything that county jail comes with. I'm going to have to deal with the violence. I'm going to have to deal with the pressures. I'm going to have to deal with everything that a jail comes with instead of actually going through the process at the comfort of my own home. Like, and that in itself, that just in itself, like creates a polar opposite experience from one and the other. Yeah, both people may be looking at similar times, but one literally has the liberty of still having their day-to-day life carry on, whereas the other is on pause. And then that 3-day arrest, that adds even more stress and trauma, mainly because of how the jails are. Whether you're in Theo Lacey in Orange County or whether you're in Men's Central County Jail in downtown LA, like these are places that are not conducive. They're not places that are meant to give you this comfort. They're places to add this squeeze to you, the squeeze of who knows what. But what I do know happens is major stress and trauma takes place, and it's not really individuals with major money that are going through this. It's the haves versus the have-nots, and it's the have-nots that are going through this pressure.
So, my brother was ineligible for bail, which I didn't even know was a thing until I saw it on his arrest. And one of the things that surprised me the most at that time was he was arrested on a Wednesday, like really early on a Wednesday, like 2, 3 in the morning on Valentine's Day Eve of 2019. And he didn't sleep that whole night because he was awake when they arrested him, didn't sleep that whole night. And I wasn't able to see him until that Friday for the first time. Didn't know where we just knew he got arrested because a friend of a friend let my parents know that my brother, along with a bunch of other people, were arrested. And he was in Rancho Cucamonga. So we are in LA. And that drive on like a Friday afternoon, I drove like 2.5 hours that first time I went to see him. And I was surprised to know that he had already been interrogated. He had already seen a judge. He had not even talked or met with a lawyer. And like he had spent hours without sleep. they set up like at a nearby parking lot, and they brought all 40 something of the people they had arrested that day and just like held them there the whole day. The news were there, helicopters were there, cops were there, dogs were there, like everybody was there. And I was shocked to know like he had already had a court date. He had never met the judge. He was interrogated for hours on end, pressured for hours on end. They threatened him. And at that time, when I was still learning about all this, it completely shocked me how they acted and like how the system was. So I'm curious to know a little bit more about y'all's experience with that. Like Hugo, I know you mentioned the interrogation, and Graham, I've heard you talk about it as well. But just the unknown, the uncertainties of like where your life is gonna go.
The way I'm glad that you described what you just described, like 40 people, dogs, cops, helicopters, because the optics of that automatically exude guilty to communities, automatically exude guilty to police officers, law enforcement, people that people trust. And it's very difficult to shake that off. I remember growing up, America's Most Wanted would create a whole reenactment of what took place. And then they would end the story by saying, and we're looking for this creep, help us catch him. And it's like, wait a minute, he hasn't even been arrested and gone through trial or anything. Like, so when we're talking about like the experience and what it feels like to go through that, like for me, I was already feeling like I'm gone. I'm done. For me, when I was arrested, I was already starting to stress out on this this mountain of an obstacle that the cops put in my head, which is A, I'm gonna be tried as an adult. B, I'm gonna get multiple, they said this too. They said I'm gonna get multiple consecutive life sentences for each charge. They even went as far as saying that I was gonna get the death penalty for a hate crime because they know that the gang that I was a part of was like racial, and this whole stack up just uh, put me in this emotional roller coaster ride that I didn't get off of for like a whole year, and it was like this. It was like they were messing with my head. And the physicalness of where I was at added to this psychological belief that like I'm better off dead than alive. Like I rather go to sleep forever than to feel this way. And that's genuinely how I felt as a 16-year-old. That's genuine, I'm not saying that like I was suicidal to the extent of actually like attempting to commit that act, but I will say that the thought like really like lingered in my mind. And I would say that being arrested for 3 counts of attempted murder um was the most trying time in my life. The other thing I could think of is going to board, to be real, to hopefully praying to God to be found suitable. But like that's the other thing. But like it's this idea that my hand is in the opinions of others, not based on facts, but based on the opinions of others, and how people get paid to paint the evilest picture of an individual. And it's not to condone harm. I'm not, this is not what I'm talking about. What I am talking about is this falseness of painting a picture that people are innocent until proven guilty, when in reality they invest so much in making an individual look guilty before you even enter into a courtroom.
Yeah, that's deep. I'm thinking about like the Miranda rights, right? And those being this insulation that was supposed to be provided through the powers that be, that is essentially like a safeguard. It's supposed to be a safeguard for you. So the first one, you have the right to remain silent. But if they don't say that if you remain silent, you'll be treated as if you're guilty, right? Like that's really what happens is they continue to treat you as if you're guilty. They get in your head, they play mind games, really, really narcissistic, powerful mind games, like what they said to you about being tried as an adult. They told me that everybody told on me, all the people that told on me, and threw facts out there. I mean, it had me shaken, right? Also, the environment. I'm thinking about the environment they keep you in during this time, occasionally pulling you out to try to crack you again. So they're just trying to get through this safeguard. The next is anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law, but also anything you don't say will be used against you as well. They painted you as if you were laughing and smirking and made you look more viable for what they were accusing you of rather than less by not speaking. You have a right to talk to a lawyer. They don't tell you that that lawyer is going to be shitty. I mean, I'm not saying all public defenders are shitty, but their caseloads are stacked and they are not getting compensated in a way that makes them buy into your case. So the entire process, all the way through, is an objectification process from the time they profile you, write your name down on a piece of paper, to the time they arrest you, read you these rights, and steadily spend the next 3 days trying to crack through these rights. Because you have a right to remain silent. That doesn't mean they're going to stop asking. They keep going and going and going, and they leave you in a room. Though I like the holding cell that I most often was arrested and put into was in Huntington Beach, which sounds fancy, but it's a quiet, sterile, cold place with bologna sandwiches for 3 days. Because I didn't talk, I didn't get my summary phone call. They found a loophole for the phone call. They left me in a room sitting handcuffed and shackled to the floor, right? Just waiting, not knowing what's coming. I know there's a camera up there. I know there's a double glass, a double reflective glass mirror in front of me. I know that they're watching me. It's the most uncomfortable, scrutinizing feeling. And I mean, I didn't talk, but it was horrifying. No, and they're saying, you're going to catch life. This person told, that person told, this person told. I know this about you. They're going into gang files. They're going into my grandmother's house, everything that they could just to crack me. I just think yeah, that came up for me while you were talking.
I love that you bring up like what the point of Miranda rights was or was supposed to be, because that's far from the experience that individuals have, especially when you don't have representation. Like it's now like an obligation of what they have to do, so much so that they say it as if they were like a drug commercial. They'll say it rapid. And it's like, of course, the individual that they're saying it to really isn't even paying attention to that word for word, unless you've heard it so many times that you already know it and you don't even have to hear the end of it. You already know what you're going to say next. You're either going to remain silent or you have something to say, either or. Like it doesn't change the fact that it's not respected for the safeguard that it's supposed to be, which is you do have the right for representation. And if you choose to remain silent, then we'll walk away and not try to coerce you in any type of way and allow you to talk to your legal representative whenever that may be. And that's far from what takes place within an interrogation room. And the crazier part about it is that there's recordings of this happening time and time again, and many judges will just go along with like, well, hey, they're technically not breaking the law by doing what they're doing. Like they're just doing their best to figure out a crime that took place. And it's like they're not abiding by this safeguard that was created. They're not adhering to that. And for a judge to rule against that when a cop is doing that, it's like they're completely ignoring it as well. The crazier part about it is that there's been instances that particular day when I was arrested that they were taking turns. The detective eventually left and someone else took the place of that person just to like exhaust me, just to like just to make me feel like no matter what, we're still gonna be here and we're still gonna hammer you until you get transported out.
That's the tricky part. So like Miranda has been around since the 60s, right? And it was under a Supreme Court decision. And the Supreme Court basically decided that it's against our constitutional rights for us to be interrogated without a set of safeguards in place that they inform us of, because then it's unknowing. Basically, you're unknowingly admitting to or being forced into admitting to things you may or may not have done. But by design, they created them in a way. So, like, a cop doesn't have to read you your Miranda rights. Only if you're getting arrested, he has to read your Miranda rights. He can still interrogate you, and you could be in your head being like, "Oh, he never read me my Miranda rights. I'm good." and he can still use everything that he gathers from that investigation to go out and find other things. He just can't charge you with what he's interrogating you for then. So he could take all your leads, go find all the rest of the evidence about you, come back, read your Miranda rights, and get you. And he doesn't ever have to use anything in the interrogation. So by design, they've created the system so that essentially cops will continue to dominate by fear, right? And subject people to the same thing that they subjected people to historically forever and prior to Miranda rights being in place. It's just a way for them to be like, oh, we covered our, we covered our asses. We read them the Miranda rights. Everything they do now is fine.
Can we talk about that a little bit more? Because we kind of jumped ahead a little bit. I'm realizing when we're talking about what happens after you got arrested, the interrogation and all that. In the past of the podcast, we have talked about arrests in terms of the media and how it's sensationalized. Right now, we have the opportunity to hear from two individuals who are formerly incarcerated and myself, who was present during my brother's first arrest and incarceration. So can you all walk us through one, if you were ever detained, and like maybe explain what the difference is, because there's a big difference between being detained and arrested, and what that arrest day moment was like for you?
Yeah, for me, it was the difference between we're just questioning to see what we could get out of you versus like, no, you're going. Regardless of what you say, what you don't say, you're coming with us. And that's where they assume, and in many cases, they do have the leverage of getting more information, because the idea is, depending on who they're talking to, that if you tell us what we want to hear, we're going to help you out and let you go home by the end of this conversation. Versus like, no, 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 that's it. Like we have enough to arrest you and you're not going anywhere. But they still play the same role as if they're there to help you out. When to this very moment, like I strongly believe that that is not the case. They come from the filters of already assuming that you're guilty versus from the position of truly investigating.
I have been detained many times. I've been arrested many, many times, probably double the amount of times I've been detained. So the time that's coming to mind was not what I went to prison for in 2005, but the time before that. So I got into a fight over a girl when I was about 19 years old, and the dude had done something rude to my girl at a party. My girl told me. I went over, I confronted him. A lot happened in that moment. I took off. I knew, for one, I was on parole. For two, I knew I was going to go away for a long, long time. And I started packing my bags. I got in a car with my boy Danny. I'm like, I'm taking off. I'm gonna run as far as I can get. And my mom, they contacted my mom, the police, the Huntington Beach Police Department, and they said, you need to get him to turn himself in. We can help him. Now I'm 19 and I have at that point 6 years of lengthy periods of incarceration, like where I was locked up or in foster care or something. And I'm like, there's no way, mom, I'm not going to turn myself in. Mama used the pressures that mama does, and she got me to go down to the AMPM on Springdale and Bolsa. And I met the cops with my mom behind them. They're like, we can help. We can help. Bam, arrested. Fought 56 to life for the next 2 years. And there was nothing that they could do. I'm thinking off of what Hugo said. There was nothing that they were going to do. Their goal was to get the maximum conviction. The only thing that got me off of that case was that the actual victims decided the way they did me was wrong and testified that they had lied when they had originally called the cops. And so I got off at prelim. That's my experience with arrest. Now, detainment, there's been plenty of times I've been walking down the street and they've stopped me. My family was pretty known in my area. Uh, and they would stop me, hold me. They'd tell me that they got me for something else. There's been times I've been accused of attacking people that I did not attack, and I've sat for hours on the curb. I've been pulled over and had my car seats ripped out of my car, been face down on the ground while they searched my car. And in those moments, it was more based on family history than my actions, or maybe my actions when I was younger, but not my actions at the time. But the liberty that they took in violating what I would think would be my rights just because of a record that shows up in a computer is asinine, but very, very regular. It's very common.
It's crazy that you say that because like I remember getting pulled over by, I don't know if they still have gang unit in Long Beach, but by the gang unit, and these were officers that were well known. And the crazy part about it is they cuff us all up. The guy that was driving was on parole. He had just got out like 6 months before, so he was on parole. And the cop opens up the trunk. He's able to search the car because this guy's on parole, and he pulls out a gun, holding it from like from the like not the trigger but like the loop, and he goes, whose gun is this? Like, someone better tell me whose gun this belongs to, or else all of you are going to jail. And immediately the guy on parole was like, someone better say something because that shit is not mine. Da, 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 da. This dude is panicking out. He's choking up. He starts tearing up. Nobody wants to take the blame. And then the cop grabs the gun and puts it back in his holster and starts laughing and calls everybody a pussy. And I'm like, this motherfucker, like that's exactly the type of manipulation that these guys would do just out of entertainment, just out of seeing how much power they have and how they could manipulate people, even if it's just an emotional level. Like they were like that's the vibe that they had. They would get entertainment out of like being law enforcement with instead of just being law enforcement.
You know, as you were talking, Hugo, the exact same thing happens in the community that I live in. You know, the officers that just drive around harassing and stalking and just like abusing people emotionally and like in many other ways. Like everybody knows that one officer, or when it gets a little calmer in the community because for some reason he's not patrolling. For me, with arrests is just how violent they are. I've shared this in earlier seasons, but I've talked about, you know, the first time that my brother was arrested, just how violent they are. They came into our home with big guns drawn. They were all dressed in like regular clothing, and they had us in our living room for hours on end. My brother was handcuffed the whole time. And I remember at one point, my mom stood up, walked from one side of the living room to another, and they were just like threatening to shoot her. They all hands immediately to their guns and just like, you can't do that. You know, we could shoot you. You know, like a 50-something-year-old senora at the time. So for me is the violence of being detained and being arrested. You know, my brother tells me that the second time he was arrested, that one of the things that has stuck with him the most was he looked down on his body and he had a bunch of lights from the guns that were pointed at him. And I just remember thinking, it's my brother, you know, like he's not a violent, dangerous person, you know, and even then is a whole other conversation of what they view as violent and quote unquote dangerous. But just the violence of being detained and arrested. And I also want to highlight that you do hear the number one complaint against cops is they're violent. And number two, sexual violence and sexual assault, and how that's so common to men and women, boys and girls, when they're being detained and arrested by cops. So when it comes to being arrested and detained throughout Abolitionists for Everybody, we've gotten different angles. And this season specifically talks about things that unless you're directly impacted, you don't know that this is a thing when it comes to incarceration. What is it that you would share with our audience about that?
I would share for those individuals that don't really or have never experienced like unfairness or violence from police officers. I would share that like we didn't all come together and have a meeting all throughout the United States and came up with the same opinion of how cops come off, not just as an opinion, but like as facts. Like this is true. Like what is happening, we have not been indoctrinated to say like screw the police. Like we want safety. Like even the most violent people want safety. They don't want to be harmed. They don't want their loved ones to be harmed. We want safety. But when it comes to the topic of police and policing, Like the people that are experiencing the unfairness are people that are in communities that are constantly being controlled, constantly being harassed just on how they look, what they're dressed like. And then one that isn't experiencing that would say, aha, what do you expect? Looks like a duck, walks like a duck, must be a duck, must be a gang member. But what they're not understanding is this is what this is what we could afford. We could afford $15 shoes, $20 pants, $5 shirts. And yeah, this becomes the attire because you now no longer look like a poor kid with poor clothes. You look like a common individual in the block where everyone is creating a trend and this is what's in. And now you go through the process and through the experience of actually like realizing, why is this cop beating me up right now? Like, why am I being treated this way? Like, why did he just cuff me up and then use the cuffs to just launch me and drag me across the asphalt? Like, why am I being treated this way? Why is it that when I think of police, I don't think of safety? I wanted to be a cop when I was a kid. Like, why is it that I don't think of that anymore? And I just want to demystify the idea that it's the negative criminals that only feel this way. It's not. It's communities all throughout the United States that have never talked to each other that feel the exact same way. This isn't a coincidence.
I love that. I'm thinking about what you said. I never wanted to be a cop, but I do understand the way that it's built up, like the image of a cop like as a figure of authority is built up, and we have a culture that emanates a desire to lean into authority. And so like I understand that, and then you grow up and you begin to get abused by the police in various forms and fashions, and you immediately shift away from that. Like you immediately can see. And I like in the conversations I have with people about some of the other work that I do when I'm advocating for folks inside or advocating for folks that are facing lengthy terms. And I tell them the things that I experience in courtrooms, that I hear out of my client's mouth, that I hear out of lawyers' mouths, like they're baffled, and I go, oh, well, that's just the regular. Like that's very common. It does not shock me because I experienced it, and I see people who experience that every single day of my life. And so like I think that normalizing the conversation is a really valuable thing to do. Just get into the conversation knowing that it was designed to be this way, and the way it's designed is to dominate and hurt people who are in vulnerable positions anyways.
Yeah, let me tell you, one of the first times I realized the effects that all of this has had on me, and I've never been like arrested or detained myself. It was just when I was there when my brother was, right? It's like I guess in a way they kind of held us all up for a few hours. I went into a coffee shop with a friend and two cops were there. And I had a reaction to that. Like I can feel my body right now. I'm about to tear up just thinking of the reaction that I had. And that's the first time I realized that something was wrong. And I remember my friend who's never had experience with like cops like that, he was like, what is going on? Like, what is happening? They're literally just standing there waiting for their coffee. I did not want to go around there. I do not engage with them. I do not talk to them. You just know, like everybody always tells you that the moment a word comes out of your mouth, that cop is going to store it somewhere to like bring it up against you at some point. Or in the work that I do now, I go into prisons. So if I have a prison that's coming up in a week, in a month, or whatever, my body is already reacting that I'm going to be around metal detectors, people with badges, like that power authority, the noises of the doors. So it's like a very I remember I saw a comedian once say there's no song that says fuck the firefighters. It's like fuck the police because we all feel like that. Hugo, thank you so much for joining us and being willing to share, some of the stress-inducing traumatic experiences that you've had. Before we hop off, what is something that we missed or that you would like to highlight for our audience?
I mean, more than anything else, I just want to highlight that like the purpose of having these conversations is to shed light on conversations that at times are left in the shadows. Uh, there, there are many things that are left misunderstood or are caught up in debate instead of like genuinely opening up the space for understanding. And I thank all of you. I thank Initiate Justice and any and everyone that supports the authenticity of wanting to understand and recognizing that that understanding comes through conversation and through really inquiring, especially when it comes to those that have experienced injustice, inequality, and 100% unfairness.
You've been listening to Abolition is for Everybody. Be sure to follow us at @abolitionis_ on Instagram, Facebook, and X for regular updates.
To support, please rate and comment wherever you listen to your podcast. Those 5-star ratings help our people find their way to us. So thank you.